Welcome to opening day of the MSI 2019 group stage here at the National Convention Center in Hanoi. The top 6 regions of the world have each set their champions to fight for glory in a stacked tournament, and a lot of questions will be answered today as we count down towards the opening games. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the MSI Countdown, where we introduce teams and a few of the powerhouses participating at MSI. I'm joined by a stacked analyst desk. We'll return to these guys in just a moment, but the group stage, each team will play 10 games in a double round robin, with the top 4 advancing to the semifinals starting May 17th, with the #1 seed choosing their opponent between the 3rd and 4th seeds. We're kicking off the group stage with a rematch of the MSI 2017 finals between SKT and G2, followed by Team Liquid versus the Flash Wolves, with Caps getting his shot at Rookie in Game 5 before Team Liquid and PvB close out Day 1. Now, last week, we saw Team Liquid, Flash Wolves, and the hometown heroes of Fongbu Buffalo make it to the groups through the play-in stage, rather. But if you missed the first week of games, here are Dracos and Frosk with the TLDR.
Thank you, Dash. Of course, Fongbu Buffalo advanced to the play-in knockouts after a tiebreaker for the top spot in Group A. There, they faced the #1 seed from North America, Team Liquid. And while Game 1 was a bit contested, Liquid pulled off a mostly clean 3-0 sweep over BVB, looking stronger and more dominant as the series advanced.
And I think there were a lot of questions specifically about Impact going to this. Now, he did play a triple carry throughout the matchup. The GP in particular really popped off. And while everyone was looking at Zeros to be the primary carry, it was really Impact that got the better of him in this matchup.
And it answered a lot of questions as to how well Impact was going to be able to perform on, a big stage such as this one. Jensen as well, showing us the power of the flex pick in the Silas, playing things like the Akali, I think, gave a lot of faith over to North American fans heading into the group stages large. But of course, the next play-in boss, Flash Wolves, were caught off guard in Game 1 of their series versus Vega, an incredibly crazy pick and ban, but managed to recover and take control, securing a 3-1 finish, with Betty being the big carry to step up and have a huge impact for his team overall.
And praise where it's due. There are a lot of new members joining this iteration of the Flash Wolves, with just Hanabi and Betty as kind of the returning veteran members, and so they needed a new leader to lead the charge for this Wolf Pack. Now, that said, Vega Squadron did bring out some key new picks, but really everything broke down when it was Betty versus Gadget in that bottom lane.
Yeah, Betty absolutely popping off, as Ezreal was incredible. Just a treat to watch overall. But the hometown team, PvB, did secure the final spot going up against Vega. Now, it started 2-0, started confident, a commanding lead, but things started to go sideways in Game 3 and 4. We went all the way to 5 games, Frosk.
I mean, to be frank, I casted that game, Dracos, and I'm still not sure quite what happened. We went the full distance, we got the silver scrapes, and in the end, it was our hometown heroes, PvB, that came out on top, but kind of to a different style. Everyone said it was going to be about the top lane, that it was going to be about Zeros, but again, people were focusing on Gadget in the bot lane, and Big Koro and Pallet for PvP are showing up this tournament. These guys look so clean, especially on picks like the Kaisa.
But now I feel like a lot of pressure on PvB after that very shaky best of 5, but of course, those are the teams we've seen compete so far. Now let's hear from the analysts on the remaining squads premiering in the groups.
Thank you very much. Those 3 teams, of course, joined some fierce opponents waiting for them in groups in Invictus Gaming, G2 Esports, and last but certainly not least, the most winning organization in League of Legends history, Korea's SK Telecom T1. We are going to start, though, with the current world champions as IG look to defend the LPL's title from MSI 2018.
And they finally got the LPL championship that's been evading them. For people, international audience that don't know this team or at least have seen them in an international stage of Worlds, they're exactly the same. In fact, with that extra caveat that we've been seeing the Shy play far more frequently. So insane early game components in this team. The Shy, Rookie, best players in their specific roles. This is exactly what you're expecting coming into this tournament.
Yeah, you have the 2 best solo laners in the world, and then you also have a jungler in Ning who absolutely loves to gank in the early game for the 2 solo laners. So it's a very, very dangerous setup you're going to be facing. And just like we saw at Worlds, you're not getting time to breathe. You're not going to get a slow early game where you can build a team fight combo and say, let's scale and rely on our AD carry. Because while you're relying on this guy to get to the late game, your solo laners have already died 3 times.
I mean, the only slow thing about IG is the slow build over a year and a half, where they went from, as you say, kind of Rookie the Shy, don't really need to look at the rest of the map, to now they're being, very much a full 5-man team who has carries in every role and who has finally kind of cemented themselves as what they are. Like, you have to call a spade a spade. They're a marked man. They're the team that everyone is trying to aspire towards. And to me, they should come in favorites for most.
Stellar expectations across the board for this IG squad. After a disappointing 2018 for the LCK, though, they're putting their faith in the Titans from the region's golden era. 3-time world champions, 2-time MSI champions SKT.
But now it's a very different SKT we're getting here. We didn't get to see them last year internationally, so they completely rebuilt around Faker in the mid lane. So a lot of new names, Mata, Teddy coming up as some of the big ones in the bottom lane. Khan in the top lane as well is a name that a lot of people are familiar with, and it is a much better SKT than I expected, at least already in Spring Split.
And the name that I cling on to is Klid. Because Klid coming in from the LPL, moving in towards SKT, the major issue that I had with SKT throughout its many generations of success, to be fair, has been the fact that they were never really strong in the jungle position. That's always been a weak point for them. And so coming into Klid, who brought those fangs into the lineup and also changed himself, grew to a point where he can actually be a far more controlled jungler, I really enjoyed that.
And so when the history books kind of write about the history of League of Legends, there will be the SKT era. And I think it's important right now, with SKT returning for the first time internationally since 2017, to remember that a lot has changed since 2017. I have this kind of cheerful here from 2017 MSI. So the last time SKT were on the MSI stage and the roster from 2017, the last time they were internationally. And if you zoom in close on this, you see names that now are very, very well known worldwide. Huni, top laner over in NA, of course. Bang and Wolf have since left SKT. The big takeaway for me here is that, Peanut, Bang, Wolf, all these players that defined SKT years ago are gone. Only SKT representative still on the team is Faker, of course, the center of the roster. Even Koma is no longer their drafting coach. He's now their overall coach. So a lot has changed in the course of 2 years. And yes, the SKT era of dominance is over, but that doesn't mean that another one can't blossom.
I mean, that's very true, and it's very fun when you see this lineup now. Like, obviously, they end up winning the Spring Split. So you might just say, okay, it was a super team build. They just succeeded from the start. But they had to go through quite a lot during this Spring Split, like a lot of different play styles, ups and downs, bad weeks. Then they turn around and suddenly look fantastic. And coming into playoffs, when they, get a 3-0 in semis, a 3-0 in finals, that was pretty unexpected. So the fact they're actually here at MSI instead of Griffin, who looked so good during most of the regular season, is still a bit of a surprise.
We put a highlight on Klid. We've talked about Teddy as well. Let's talk about the one team that we haven't just yet, the LEC's representative in G2, who are coming in with the most stacked roster Europe has ever seen.
And I always say, if you can beat Origin 3-0, you can win MSI. And that's
Is that what we say?
That's what we say now.
Okay.
That's why G2 come in as
6-0.
one
What
of
is
the
6-0?
favorites.
That's like a best of 10 or something.
Even better then, but this is the G2 lineup that has added Caps into the mid lane from when we saw them last year internationally. They've added Mickey into the support role, and Perks has role swapped down to the bottom lane. And this has now meant they build a lineup of superstars in every single role if you look at how they compete against others back in Europe. And they are so creative in the way they're drafting and playing. So they're super annoying to deal with on the Rift.
Yeah, one thing that I really enjoy about this team is the fact that you mentioned the fact that they're star-studded, but it really changed the mentality that they had. That when I watch G2 play, I'm like, am I watching LPL? Like, what league am I watching now? Because whenever you see that kind of active aggression, I enjoy the fact that, for me, Perks and Mickey X have really been a shining light to me, because not only are we hearing a lot of how they're playing on the Rift, but also in terms of just in practice, when people talk about this team and how you can never really practice against them and know what they're playing because you got mages like Cassiopeia that you really kind of expect when they come into the LC.
And it's important that you mention Mickey, and of course G2 Esports did release a statement yesterday kind of quelling some of the questions. They're understandable questions after, Mickey talked about kind of his struggles after they've won the title 3-0 of Origin. So the big takeaways here is that very recently, Mickey's been able to come in and start scrimming, I believe it was yesterday and today kind of thing, so the last 48 hours. It does, of course, cement that they have been playing without him for the great majority of the past month or so.
Promiscu, he is the sub, and he was playing in Korea. Obviously, we did have the situation back in Europe as well for G2. During most of playoffs, Mickey barely scrimmed with the team, only a few games a day maximum due to his injury. So it's not like they're not used to scrimming with Promiscu and then still using Mickey on stage. But obviously, we have to see how he's individually performing after his fairly long break here up till MSI.
A storyline we'll have to track. He is starting. The team will have the option to sub him out at any time if they need to. It's time for a break. When we return, we'll discuss some players to watch for the group stage and ask, is the Shy the best player at MSI?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's answered. But we'll talk about some other players too, I promise, after this.
I think that this MSI is different because Western teams have way more confidence going into MSI because we actually proved that we can compete with the best teams during Worlds last time. And I think right now is like the true test if it actually stayed this way and we can compete against the Korean teams and Chinese teams, or if it was just a fluke and we are actually like still way, way worse. So we'll see.
Welcome back to MSI Countdown, where we're gearing up for Game 1 of Group Stage. You heard from Jankos there, some confidence for the Western teams coming into MSI. They feel like they can compete. Going to need that kind of confidence with the day one that G2 has ahead of them, SKT and IG, all to kick it off.
I think the players are feeling it. I think everyone's feeling it. This is a tournament where every team is coming in with their chest puffed out with a goal. And that a lot of these teams are coming in looking to win, but I think everyone is looking to represent favorably. And it's not a tournament where people are already defeated before the tournament starts and Korea is going to win. That could still end up being the result. And yet, that right now, there's so many different possibilities that can come out of MSI 2019.
The last international event really does resonate with a lot of these players. And honestly, the fans coming in looking at the fact that the 3 of the 4 semifinalists were Western teams. So just having that in the back of your mind, that really did push us into this MSI event where that understand that anything is possible.
Yeah.
Through.
I also just love the confidence you're going to have if you're SKT, IG, or G2. Like, you 3-0'd your final going into this. Like, you were clear-cut the best team in that final entering into MSI. So there's zero reason to not believe that you actually can go all the way here.
Well, all of them deserve rather to be confident, as we have some of the world's best players having gathered here in Hanoi. And these are the ones that have captured our focus ahead of today's games in players to watch. 4 groups. They are SKT's Teddy, IG's The Shy, G2's Wonder, and Team Liquid's Core JJ. Let's start with Teddy.
And just the fact that we're starting with Teddy on a lineup with Faker and Mata, 2 of the greatest Korean players of all time in League of Legends, lets you know that right now, their primary carry, if you look at playoffs, it's Teddy and his consistency. This guy is AD carry excellence, and to me, he comes in inarguably the greatest AD carry at this tournament.
And a great scouting, ahead of the split. You look at him on Jin Air, it was very clear that he was a great player on not a very good team, but still they managed to bring him into SKT now. They put him on the big stage and he's performing instantly. Like, there was no issues for him in the final when it comes to late game performances on these different AD carries. And I think when you have someone like him, it guarantees that if you go late into the game, you always have a main win condition.
A testament to the mechanism that is SKT as well, to be able to pluck a player like that and definitely turn him into a star in such a quick or short amount of time. Let's talk about The Shy, though, because this is a guy who's becoming a household name.
I always have to check my eyes when I'm watching his matchups because he always locks in like Vladimir into these really bad matchups, like in the Jason Rise, and comes out with like favorable trades, solo killing at times. For me, he's a player that you watch and he's just a transcending top laner that people can look at. And I know we made a joke a bit earlier and just confidently say that he is the best player in the world. So it's insane that coming into this one, that a lot of the eyes of these insane carry top laners are looking onto him to see if they can topple him.
And I know from Worlds last year, from talking to a lot of teams, when they're making these little different tier lists of picks that you're aiming for early, you make a normal tier list and then you make 4 when you're facing the Shy. Because then you have to suddenly put a lot of new picks up towards the top where, we can't give him Jace, we can't give him this.
Which one do you give him?
I mean, ideally you can ban 20 carries and then you can play like Ornn or something.
That's the 2025 tips, when we've expanded it to 30 bans.
More in there.
Technology's coming.
It's so difficult to deal with him.
Oh, without a doubt, there's a lot of players that have their work cut out for them. One of those being G2's Wonder. I want to talk about this guy because he's been making some waves.
Best in the West is something I said about Wonder, and he's a player who, among his star-studded lineup, his consistency and the fact that, yes, years ago on Splice and other teams that have come to Worlds, he has had those pop-off games that made you give him a second glance. It's his consistency, aside great carries like Caps and Perks, that has really kind of elevated him, at least to me, as top of that Western tier list.
Yeah, and just like The Shy, he's also a player who brings in a lot of different views on how matchups are supposed to be played. He has a lot of pocket picks ready that you're not prepared for, and you know that he's a smart player who can really abuse these openings if you don't fully know what he's going to do against you. So there's often times if G2 are falling slightly behind in the early game, Wonder is one of the players who will keep them in that game by just being a super great split pusher, and then eventually the rest of the team can catch up.
And from there, we're going to jump over to NA's representatives, TL, Core JJ, the Spring Split MVP.
For me, I really want to see how he's coming into this tournament because a lot of eyes on Team Liquid was looking into the last unsuccessful run. because what Core JJ brings to this lineup is, championship pedigree. He was a world championship once upon a time, and of course, MVP of the split first in the LCS. And so for him, there's a lot of confidence in his shot calling abilities. And then when they get in those moments or in dragon fights that they've had moments and, being able to fall, that he would be able to rally them around those times.
I mean, Doublelift's been on a 6-year quest to find a support to really kind of match his drive and ambition to be internationally renowned outside of just North America. And he brings over Core JJ, a world champion, someone whose shot calling has been praised both by Team Liquid, and of course he was a chief shot caller on the Samsung Galaxy lineup, the One World. So I nicknamed this guy Core GG for a reason. He's classy, he's consistent, and he's exactly what Team Liquid need.
Yeah, one of the two additions that the team made with hopes of international success, in contrast to kind of the detrimental performances they put up just last year. With an international event, though, comes a whole mess of pathogens that can infiltrate one's performances. So we're going to send it over to Dr. Azael and Dr. Mark for this very special installment of MSI ER.
Thanks, Dash. As we head into MSI, teams and fans are feeling increased stress levels as the hopes of the regions fall on their shoulders. This has led to some fans developing performance anxiety and regional dysmorphia.
It's a tense time of the year, but studies have shown the best way to treat this is to simply realize everyone looks hard-stuck Iron 4 from time to time.
Even us, somehow.
Hard to believe. The specific symptoms may vary, but the result is the same, and we have prepared a battery of clips to inoculate you. Take Flash Wolves, for example. In a game versus AHQ this spring, Flash Wolves suffered temporary loss of motor function in their fingers.
Yeah, most commonly, this disease is referred to as Yellow Star fever in commemoration of Yellow Star's infamous Thresh plague.
Everyone knows that one.
Yeah, and if you move over to the European squad, G2, they've been struggling with inattentional blindness, which is when the brain disregards information that it deems unnecessary. So remember, this is not an eye problem, it's a brain problem.
Yeah, a famous study demonstrated inattentional blindness when it asked participants whether or not they noticed a gorilla walking through the scene of a visual task they had been given. This is very similar to what happened with Perks. He could only see the Infernal Dragon and the AD he was about to get from it, unable to see a Thresh.
Yeah, not bad reactions, just couldn't see it. Meanwhile, Team Liquid seems to be suffering from
dyschronometry.
Yeah, that one. It's when an individual cannot accurately estimate the amount of time that has passed. And this is when Core JJ flashes, he has no idea that his stun has already happened.
Incredible.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to say that no team is perfect. Even the 3-time world champions SKT have a condition called God Complex, in which the players are given an unshakable belief in themselves.
Not them too.
Even them.
It's characterized by consistently inflated feelings of personal ability, privilege, or infallibility. Faker, being the best League of Legends player ever, believes he's perfectly safe taking the claw over the wall into 5 people. And Faker, unfortunately, suffers from Faker Complex, which is a far more serious form of God Complex.
I can't believe he's developed that. Taking a look at the hometown favorites, PVB, we've diagnosed them as suffering from short-term memory loss, which, as you can see in this play, expressed itself by Null forgetting that he already swapped summoner spells to teleport in the middle of a team fight.
Yeah, you really hate to see that happen. And finally, Invictus Gaming, a classic case of lizard brain. This refers to the oldest part of the brain stem, which is responsible for primitive survival instincts such as aggression and fear. It's fight or flight, if you will.
Yeah, and Invictus Gaming have an overly whelming strong fight instinct that can override all logic that has been telling you, for God's sake, don't take that fight. You don't need it.
Back off.
What are you doing?
Why do you keep going?
Azael, why are they still going in? Why are they still going in?
I don't know, Mark, but as you can see, no team is perfect.
No, not a single one of them is perfect.
Yeah, your team has problems? Well, guess what? So do the others, but they made it here for a reason.
Absolutely, that is the takeaway. You should be proud of your region, even if they have flaws.
Yeah, and we've seen in the past, nothing is predetermined. Your team has a chance to beat any team in any given game.
Yeah, us medical professionals love to say anything can happen, even NA winning worlds.
No one says that.
No, I've heard that a couple times.
No.
I mean,
no one has said that,
I have
Mark.
said that.
Yeah, let's get out of here. Let's go to the break.
Mình cảm giác rất vinh dự khi được đại diện cho đội tuyển Việt Nam đánh tại sân nhà. Mình nghĩ cả thế giới sẽ biết được bộ mặt sức mạnh của con vua Volo qua mùa giải này.
It's a lot of responsibility. You're the only representative of your region. Baker's pretty good, I guess. IG's a pretty good team. We're gonna beat them anyway.
我们想跟自闪亮的粉丝们说，我们会回到台北的舞台上打比赛。
Last Worlds, Rookie and IG destroyed me and G2. But we will always get back up, because that's what we do. I want this revenge. And when we're done with IG, they're gonna have to prove that they can get back up, because we're gonna take over the world.
开始到我们要证明自己的时刻了。我个人一直都想着像 SKT 一样，成为跟他一样的就是战队。这一次我们如果能再拿到 MSI 的好成绩的话，我们可以跟着 SKT 的一条路一样。
작년에 ACK가 많이 좋지 않은 성적이 냈었는데 그 점에 대해서는 저도 굉장히 아쉽게 생각하고 있고 2019년 MSI에서 좋은 성적을 내는 것이 가장 중요하지만 또 LCK의 그 위상 같은 거를 되찾아오는 것도 중요할 것 같습니다.
Welcome back to MSI Countdown, where we're not far from Game 1 of the MSI 2019 group stage. The LEC champions G2 are coming off a dominant split on home soil, but will need to pull out some clever tactics from their playbook, rather, to take down SKT. But my first question is this the best team EU has ever seen?
I will say in terms of raw individual talent, yes, it is. We still need to see results internationally from this lineup before we can start doing a lot more with that statement. But I think how they managed to build this team of 5 players who are individually gifted and also think the same way about how you can play the game. And they're not afraid to be creative in drafts. You highlighted that already as a big strength. Like, here's an example of what they have done. This was like a quote-unquote a funnel comp when that was supposed to be dead, and it was picked into Zona Tarek in the final against Origin. And they used this like insane support composition to just roam around the map 24/7 with caps on Pike, and it's literally impossible to prepare for.
And they certainly have far more prepared. Like, I've heard a lot in terms of just practice talk, where Perk's sure coming out with 80 carries, and this one it was Isaiah Rakan, but the Cassiopeia is always something that he's willing to play. And during the regular season, he brought up the Zoe on the bottom side of the map. So he's the type of player that you go into draft and you always have to have him in mind.
It's just G2 are a team where you look at the team comp that we had up, and it's both a funnel comp with Zaira Khan being able to jungle, and also it's a roaming support comp. And the thing about G2 is, you know, they're a super team. You know, we've had multiple super teams over the course of particularly the last few years, ever since Uzi jumped on OMG years ago. Stacking a roster makes a lot of sense. But my experience has been, having reviewed multiple of them, is that with super teams, when you apply the fine-tooth comb, when you get the magnifying glass out, you see the flaws of putting together superstars who've carried their team rather than necessarily the innate synergies between them. But I think that G2 is actually more than the sum of their parts. They're intelligent. And the fact that with that fine-tooth comb, you learn more and more about what League of Legends is and can be, is to me just a huge shout out to G2.
Yeah, and I think it's very, very important that we step away from it being a story of a team who's just stomping laning phase and then just winning in like no time, because they actually don't necessarily destroy you super early. Mid-game is where they really shine, because they're extremely good at understanding which is the strong side of the map they play towards, and they have all these individual players who are willing to roam and make plays that are really hard to actually predict, and it gives them a lot of setups where suddenly they're 3v2 before you even know what's happening. They win the skirmish and they take an objective for it. So they're really, really good in the mid-game, and that's where they really shine.
Because they have the same mentality, and this is very rare where you see a super team that come in and they just gel almost immediately. Because even the reference that you made of OMG and Uzi, that wasn't successful because it took so long for them to come into the same mentality that everyone has like the idea that they're the ones the resources should be going to. But for G2's instance, they came in, they were an incredibly aggressive team because they knew if there's a play being made through Jankos, everyone's rotating in on the play. So I love that factor, and also the same case of the bottom side being willing to give away resources, which I enjoy.
I think the quickness of the team, though, Deficio, it's interesting that you say they're not dominant necessarily from minute one.
I mean, they can be.
They can be, yes, but they aren't necessarily. And then you contrast that with the game time of their final, eclipsing 30 minutes from the previous record held for fastest best of 5 over there in Europe. I mean, that's astronomical, and that's going to give any team a solid
Let's talk about SKT.
coming in. Let's talk about SKT. How about we do that? All right, well, while there's a lot of hype around SKT's return to the international stage, I think we have to talk about, of course, the fact that they face a tough task in containing G2's aggression and volatility.
And honestly, it's something that I think that I look at SKT as, unlike G2, that we kind of saw the quality of G2 in week 1 of the LEC. SKT have been more of a chameleon. They've been a slow starter. They've been kind of feeling out what it is to be Khan, Clid, Faker, Teddy, Mata, and the big brands and new players that make up that 5. And they've evolved their style. Their style in week 1 to week 3 was kind of playing more towards the early game, kind of working out what that could mean, what that could look like. It worked till it didn't, and then they beta tested a new style, and then another style. And only towards the end, in their 6-0 sweep of first King Zone into Griffin, did we see them go the more measured choice of just hanging back and working things out. I think they're going to be a team that wants to see the MSI meta and judge it before the best of 5 stages. So I think the best of 5 stages is where they'll look their best.
They're certainly the most well-rounded team. And I think a lot of that comes to the fact where I look at Clid and say that, coming in from the LPL, he was one of those junglers that always had action in mind.
Sure.
Like, Lee Sin was certainly something that stood out to me. His Rengar was something that I really had fun with to see. And going into the LCK, he was a jungler that actually started to play a lot more measured, far more controlled, but didn't lose out in his fangs. Like, he was still the type of player that would be the first one to start the fight. And I think that gave a lot to SKT's ability to play against team that had a lot of early game pressure.
Yeah, and to add on to the point about them being well-rounded, you talk about how he has early game impact and they can actually do something there, but also if it ends up going late game, we already talked about Teddy from earlier today in our players to watch segment. And that's an AD carry where if you get to late game team fights, you might have 4 players around him who can make some crazy plays from time to time, but he will always be insanely consistent.
Deficio, Teddy was forged in the fire of 1v9ing on Jin Air Green Wings, a perennial relegation team. If this team didn't have Teddy fire, no one was. And the fact that he was able to come onto SKT, they get the best of that because his team fighting is still immaculate. But he's also just another piece in the team rather than just the main piece, the main chess piece. Tells you SKT is pretty damn good.
Well, the stage is set. We got one piece of business to take care of before we jump into it, and that would be our predictions for the day. We're going to throw the first 3 games onto the screen.
Hi, if I was with you in G2.
All 3 of you align on the second 2 games, TL and IG, so we're going to talk about this first one here. Raz, we're starting with you. You go with SKT.
I'm surprised that that's surprising. What?
I don't know why
you're the odd man out. That's why I'm starting with you. I wouldn't say it's necessarily surprising. Quickly, though, why are you so confident in SKT coming away with the victory here?
Because I talked about them being the most well-rounded team. I think that's going to be the case. They have the best bottom lane in the whole tournament, and I think that's going to carry them through.
All right, Speedy, why G2?
G2 will have an amazing strategy prepared in the pick and ban phase.
You cannot prepare for this G2 squad. With that, the stage is set, so we're going to be tossing it into the arena.